have you ever felt like you were trying to be a strong father on the outside, but inside you were still trying to figure things out for yourself? Have you ever been in those kind of situations?
Damn, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
So I guess the answer is yes, and
Detail.
it's probably when when Hamza first attended nursery,
Yeah.
he was smaller than a lot of the other kids. So when you looked at the kids around him, they were quite tall, much more taller.
Yeah.
Looked a bit more mature. Whereas Hamza
Yeah.
was quite short, and he'd often come home crying,
Yeah.
saying that he got bullied. So he'd feel like he's getting bullied all the time, and
Okay.
and as a father, you think to yourself, damn, you know what bullying's like, and we none of us condone bullying, and you want
Yeah.
to you want to make him strong, but then
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a process to get strong. It's not as you can't just say to a toddler, man up. That's not going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So you have to try and hide your emotions, and know that
Yeah.
he's going to have to go through this journey himself, and
That's
literally
painful.
he'll have to take he'll have to get bullied, and eventually he'll overcome it,
Yeah.
and you try to advise him, but in the inside you're thinking, my son's getting bullied, and it's not like you can go to nursery and then pick up the kid and dash him somewhere, because
No. No. No.
that's
Of
not what
course.
we do. That's not what we do. We have to go through the process, and then we have
Yeah.
to pass down what we know as adults and what we've experienced, because we've all been
Yeah.
bullied,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
but do it in a way where your son doesn't see the weakness, and
Yeah.
you don't want to come across cold, but at the same time you want to
Yeah.
coach him or encourage him to sort of stand up for himself.
Yeah. Bro. All
and
right.
and
So, like, see,
and
when you was trying to guide him, what was your emotional state like? Did you show signs of like that you're upset, that you're reacting, or was it just calm, just trying to embrace him? What methods did you use to just
um
first of all calm yourself down and also just reassure him? Like, what was your emotional state at that time like?
so so I guess with any child, when you send a child into the world by himself, and
Yeah,
and don't forget, going to nursery, that's his first uh experience, or his first introduction to the world. Whereas prior
yeah,
to that, he stayed with us, and as parents, you look after them to the best of your ability.
yeah,
And so it upsets you, but then you sort of joke it off with him. You sort of say, you know, why don't you punch the kid back? Or maybe you try to
yeah,
encourage him, but not in
yeah,
a way where you want to turn him into a bully, but in a way where you want to say to him, like, just stand up for yourself. But deep inside, you don't want to come across upset, because if you're coming across upset, then your son's going to think something's not quite right. So you have to
yeah,
control those emotions, and you have to try and guide him in the best possible way. But it's not like I can have a conversation with you, you're a grown ass man, I can explain to you
yeah,
and
yeah.
and
It's
and
not the
coach
same.
you, but
Yeah,
it's not the same trying to coach a 2-year-old. You trying to coach a
yeah.
2-year-old. He ain't gonna understand. He
No,
in
no,
his
of
word,
course.
it's being bullied is the worst thing in the world for him, because he hasn't experienced it.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's a tough one, but I guess the way we've all been brought up is to
yeah.
suck it in, and not don't take things personally, but it's a life experience. It's one of those things where you have to go through the motions to then get stronger.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, your answer sort of triggered some memories of mine because I went through a similar phase, but at a different age with my son. He was about what age was he? About around about 9 that he came to me and he actually broke down and cried. He said, "Dad, I'm getting bullied. These kids keep on picking on me," and
Yeah.
he's been taught by his mum to tell the teacher to walk away, and I'm telling him the opposite. So he's fearing what I'm saying, but it makes sense. Because what I would tell him is, look, don't let anyone push you around. Stand your ground. Don't let anyone push you around. That is what I would always say to him. And we know what goes on, what the teachers say, and what goes on in the playground. The reality of what happens in the playground, and it's that
Mm.
like, so things don't escalate to physical violence. You see what I'm saying, bro? That you're trying to
Yeah,
avoid that.
no, absolutely.
You're
Yeah,
trying to not
absolutely.
get him into trouble and not allow it to escalate that. But where do you draw the line in terms of advice? Where do you draw the line in terms of just holding your own? It's a tricky one, you know. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Go on.
and I guess off the back of that, so lessons for me were, I mean, look, we all grew up in Fulham, and
Yeah, yeah,
the number of times people called us Packy, or the number of
yeah,
times
yeah,
we got into fights, um, and it made us stronger because we were one of, I think, four Asian families in Fulham, yourself
mm.
included, and we grew
Yeah,
up we grew up at a time where it was fist fights. So you'd get
yeah,
into a confrontation and it's fist fights, and it's and whoever wins is the better man, I guess, and you walk away from
yeah,
it. The challenge in today's society is, uh, you want to protect your kids, so you don't want
yeah,
to encourage them to fight, because
yeah,
in today's world, a fight doesn't end with fists. Children pull out
yeah,
knives, and in
yeah,
some
yeah,
parts of
yeah,
them,
yeah,
children pull out guns, and
yeah,
so you're dealing with totally different dynamics to what we dealt with. If
yeah,
if the world was like it was 30 or 40 odd years ago,
yeah,
then I'll tell my son, punch the guy back in the face or do something,
yeah, yeah,
and that's how I bring up my kid. But now it's like you have to be, it's like you have to be political, and you have to
yeah,
pick your battles, and think, is it worth having this confrontation? Because there's two ways you can look at it. If you're fighting a man that's got nothing to lose, there's nothing
yeah.
stopping him pulling out a knife and just ending your life,
No, not at
because
all.
he's got
No,
nothing to
yeah,
lose.
yeah,
So to him, it's
precisely.
like got nothing to lose. But now, if your son's, you're trying to bring your son up to be good, you want to educate your son, you want him to get a
Yeah,
decent job, and then
yeah,
and then so his thought process is, live by the rules, work as hard as I can, and then
yeah,
be an example to society, versus someone that's got nothing to lose. He's always going to lose. He's because he's going to play by the rules. He's not going to go and stab a guy because he wants to get a good job. He doesn't want to get arrested. He
yeah,
doesn't want to deal with the police and the justice or legal system.
yeah,
And dealing with the legal and justice system in the UK, you're already on the back burner because of, we're people of color. So
yeah,
how
yeah, yeah. That's
how
another
those
system.
scenarios will always go down for us.
Oh my
And
God.
and I
That,
guess, so what I do is, so with my boys, I train. They train like, you train your boys. My boys are quite disciplined. They
yeah,
Every morning they wake up and they do their exercise, and so what I'm doing is I'm training them to be strong mentally. So it's about, understanding the rules,
how do you do
understanding.
that? Give me an example of that, bro. Like, what does that schedule look like? So you're training them
Yeah,
like
so
in
so
terms.
so my boys, they as soon as they wake up, they go to the toilet, they go to the bathroom, they brush
Yeah,
their teeth, and they know they got to do their burpees before breakfast. So, I
yeah,
have a Hamza's been doing burpees since the age of 2, because when I was doing them at home, he'd sort of mimic
yeah.
me. So as a
Okay.
toddler, they sort of mimic your, the father. So if
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like, even now, my youngest Zayn, he's trying to copy us doing burpees, and he's only 16 months. So
Wow.
so from a young age, Hamza's been doing burpees, and now he's 8, and he knows, according to his age, he's got to do the number of burpees. So if you're 3 years old, you've got to do 30 burpees. If you're 4 years old, you've got to do 40. He's now 8 years old and he's doing 80 burpees a day. Issa's younger, he's 7, he does 70 burpees a day. So that's it's according to their age, and every year it
Yeah.
increases by 10. So he knows, no matter what,
Mashallah.
before I even touch breakfast, I need to earn that. I need to earn my right to have breakfast, and that is doing your exercise.
Yeah.
So the day starts, with discipline, and that's really important, because for boys especially, if boys aren't disciplined, then they tend to get into trouble. They have to stay busy, and they have to grow up in a way where they understand structure, they understand discipline, but also that mental strength of knowing, okay, um, I'm strong enough. I know I can have you in a fight if I need to, but then I'll control
Yeah.
myself because I know I've got that strength. Whereas
That's
if
the
you're
key, bro.
weak,
That's
Yeah.
the key, isn't
If
it? Like to develop
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
maturity, the self-control, isn't it? Yeah,
Correct.
I get that.
Whereas if you're a weak-minded individual, I mean, you just got to look at society. Most of the people that commit horrendous crimes, and even when you look at some of our politicians, you can see they've never picked up a dumbbell in their life, and they're weak-minded, and they're probably kids that had a weak upbringing, and their mindset is weak. So they compensate by being these leaders around the world, and starting wars that they don't need to start. So and that's
Yeah.
the risk, that's the danger. So you can see a sign of a weak man.
Oh,
Mm.
amazing. I mean, bro, you've hit a lot of things there because when you was mentioning those things, do you know what came across to me? Because it's tough for us fathers coming from an era that we're coming from, where it's all about standing ground and just instant reaction. If you get hit back. But now we're dealing with a different kind of generation where no, you can't hit because you'll get done for. So it's
Mm.
like you got to control yourself at the same time, not lose your rag, and also educate the kids at the same time and play by the rules. That's really challenging because there's always going to be a difference in the generation where we're coming from, and soon come that our sons are going to go through the same thing when they have their own sons as well,
Correct.
isn't it? There's always
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
generation gap, and as fathers, if our conditioning is naturally just to react, that means we have to train ourselves as well that we can't take it personally. That means that we've got to understand the current situation as well. So that requires a certain level of maturity and awareness, isn't it? So yeah,
Yeah.
what you said totally resonated, bro. Yeah, I get that.
So,
That's
so, so
yeah,
I
go on.
guess so a father figure in the home, your boys are watching you. Your boys are watching you, the way you treat your wife, the way you respect your parents, the
Yeah,
way you
man.
handle situations. So they're watching
Yep.
every single move. So me and my wife, we have a rule where we don't
Yep.
fight in front of the kids. We don't raise our voice. We're respectful towards one another. Um, and that's all educating the children, because if you can have a civilized conversation in a calm manner and the kids feel protected and they're observing and they're learning, then what you're doing is you're growing, you're teaching boys to grow up in
Mm.
a respectful manner. You're teaching boys to have constructive dialogues, and a lot of it is self-awareness. So it's
Okay.
being aware of your own actions, but also being aware of the other person's actions. So I know when I'm winding someone up,
Yeah.
and there's a limit to how far you can wind someone up. So I'm fully aware, some of the things that I'm doing, and that's
Oh,
years
wait.
of,
Yeah.
years of training and years of being in different types of roles that have got me to this stage. But a lot of men, they get to their mid 40s or 50s and they haven't had half the training, and they
Yeah.
deal with scenarios in a different way, and then the kids that are in their house are observing those scenarios,
Mm.
and then all they're doing is carrying on that pattern of um, ineffective behavior. So first and foremost, a father's role, especially in a household where you have your
Mm.
wife and your children, and especially daughters as well, because if you have a daughter, a daughter needs to see the type of man that she aspires to marry in the future. If the
Yeah.
man at home or the father at home is abusive and is swearing at the wife or the spouse and then swearing at the children, then likely that's her benchmark of what a husband is. Whereas if
Okay.
a father is well disciplined and respectful and has a loving family home and environment, then the likelihood is that child or that female growing up would look for that same in her spouse, and
Yeah.
stop stop a lot of, I guess, domestic marriages in the future. But the education starts at home. So if you look at the pattern, it's usually men that have come from broken homes or haven't had that man figure in their life to bring them up in a way which is respectful.
Okay. Okay. Hack, there's a few things that you've said there that I want to pull you up on as well. Is this okay? So you've mentioned about the awareness. How do we as fathers develop an awareness where we're able to know how we're coming across and also acknowledge how they're coming across? It's like trying to be empathetic and sympathetic at the same time. How do we even build that, develop that role, rather than going through just an autopilot reaction from my own upbringing, and I'm just bringing it into my own current relationship. So especially when we're living in a time where we're being fathers, but the way we're being fathers is there's no guidance. We're not educated of how to be fathers, and it's raw and real on the go, learning through our failures. Um, but how do we develop that self awareness, bro, to just look at what I'm doing, contributing to the actions of my family, and also just be aware of how the other person is feeling or coming across. How do you even develop that? What's
So,
the first step that we could take, bro, to just educate
it's,
ourselves about that, bro?
so so we have a me and my wife have an understanding of if we do something that we feel the other person has displayed negative behaviors or displayed a trait which could be perceived as negative for the kids, we will pull each other up on it. We wouldn't do it immediately.
Okay.
We'll let the boys or go to bed, and then eventually in the evening, in a calm situation, not in a
Mm,
confrontational way. It's more, Hack, this is how you behaved with Hamza. This is how Hamza felt. And yeah, I'm not perfect. So, I'm
yeah,
not saying I'm a,
yeah, of course.
there's times when I have lost it. And
Yeah, yeah, of
it's
course.
being able to accept that feedback from my wife to then
Yeah.
fix it. So my wife will say, this is what triggered it, because, she might say to me, you were on the phone. He was trying to get something off you. You were clearly busy. He doesn't understand because he's too young. But then the way you
Mm,
reacted wasn't great. So so the next time that happens, so now Naz, if Hamza's calling me and I'm busy and he's doing something, I'll give you a classic example. So I came home from work the
yeah.
other day just to pop in to get something, and my middle son Issa he wanted me to look at the internet to buy some Lego, and I was just rushing in and rushing out, and
Yeah.
he must have called me about 100 times in the space of about 2 minutes, and I said to Issa, look, I could have lost it because I was really busy, and I knew I
Yeah.
was about to lose it. I knew I was about to lose it, but then I said, Issa, I can't talk now.
Yeah.
Let me come home this evening, and I promise you we'll look at it together then. But now Daddy's got to go. And
Okay.
that was off the back of feedback of previous examples or previous events where I have lost it. And
Ah, all right.
and that was
Okay.
that was a much better interaction because Issa accepted it, and
Yeah.
he walked off happy. Whereas I could have in fact left a totally different experience. I could have said to him, I haven't got time. I'll
Yeah.
leave me. I could have said, I haven't got time. Leave me alone, for instance. And I
Yeah.
could have walked out the front door. Now, the experience for Issa would have been, my dad's too busy to talk to me.
Okay.
Um, but then it's the follow up. So then when I did come home, and then he said, can we have a look at it? And I said, yeah, let's sit down, let's have a look at it. So
Yeah.
he, pulled out the laptop, went on the internet, showed me the Lego he wanted, and then ordered it. So
Mm,
it's really understanding when you've got those triggers and someone pulling you up on it, or you yourself realize it. So at that particular time, I realized exactly what I was doing and how I was about to explode. But then I
yeah.
contained myself and I thought, rather not behave in that way because it's not nice,
Yeah.
explain to him in a calm manner, but then follow up on it later.
Okay. Oh. Bro, I like what you said there. There was something that you said, a follow up. That's funny that
Mm.
you said that because a couple of days ago, my son came upstairs to me and they wanted to talk to me. But he didn't communicate what he wanted to speak about. He just sat there and he asked me, Dad, how are you? But really indirectly, he was trying to say that, Dad, I want to reach out to you. I got something to say. And then I said, Son, what's it about? So we sat there in silence for about a minute or two. And then I goes to him, Son, what's the matter? Something's on your mind. And he was like, No, it's all right, Dad. I just want to see how you're doing. And then I said, yeah, son, I'm just doing this. I'm doing a bit of work and just trying to sort this and that out. And he was just silent and he remained silent. And then he just walked off. And then when you said that thing about follow up, sometimes when we flop at something, it doesn't matter that the fact that we flopped. It's what you said that what we're gonna do afterwards. It's that follow up. It's on my days. I've just realized what I just done. I need to check in with him to make sure that he's all right now. Or like, say for example, if something need to be communicated and it weren't at that time communicated, just pull him up or let him pull me up on something. It's you're right about that follow up. I can relate to that because I found following up is it brother does wonders. It just
No,
neutralizes a lot of
it's
tension.
powerful. It's powerful,
Yeah,
and I'll give you another example. So you know, I work in the NGO sector now, so I'm busy.
yeah,
I'm doing some crazy hours.
yeah,
Love the job that I'm doing. Wouldn't change it for the world. But in terms of my work life balance, I don't get to
yeah.
spend time with my kids.
Mm,
And Hamza said to me the other day, Dad, you don't build Lego with us anymore. You don't play board
yeah,
games with us anymore. And these are 8 and 7 year old kids.
yeah,
So for me, that was a reality check. So I said to him, do you know what? Friday night, let's have a movie night. Me, you, Issa, we'll sit down, grab some popcorn, and we'll have a movie night.
yep,
And I can't, I made it a conscious effort to keep my promise. So Friday night we had a movie night. They watched Transformers. I enjoyed it as well. Um,
yeah,
and and off the back of them watching Transformers, they wanted to order the toys. So, but it made a big difference in their lives. For them that was like the best. They were looking forward to it the whole week, and that was the best thing in the world for them because they're like, we got to spend time with our daddy.
yeah,
And at one stage, I took my phone out, and Hamza said to
yep,
me, "Daddy, it's movie night. You need to put your phone away." And so I did. I put my phone away, and totally, he was right in saying that because we're so consumed to our devices, it ruins that connection with our children. And
yeah,
if we're not careful, then we're creating the next generation to do the same when they have their children. They'll be stuck to devices.
mm,
So no, it was important that Hamza's 8 years old, and he pulled me up on it, which is great, and he's got the confidence to pull me up and stuff like that, and the confidence comes to the years of training and the years of having adult conversations. I don't talk to
mm,
them like kids. I talk to them like adults. We have a system in the house where both my kids get pay slips. They've got
yeah,
pay slips for the last I think 3 or 4 years. And it's a made up
mm,
pay slip, but it's
yeah,
like they get a bit of pocket money for doing chores. And then I deduct rent. So we
yeah.
deduct bills, rent. They pay a bit of charity.
Wow.
Um, so they have a pay slip every single month.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
if they don't spend that money, then I invest it for them. So what I'm teaching them there is I'm teaching them to become sensible with their money, but also independent. So when we go out, it's not like Daddy buy me this toy. It's like, Dad, I've got this much money in my bank account because Hamza keeps a
Mm,
record of what he has. I didn't spend any money for the last few months, so I've earned this much
mm.
in profit share. So he's figured it all out. He's an 8 year old kid, and he works
Allah.
out. He gets 10%.
Yeah,
He gets 10% profit share. So we're in South Africa. So to the last rand, he will say
yeah,
to me, Dad, you've got 1,368 rand of mine.
yeah,
And then we'll go to a toy shop. He'll choose toys of about 200-300 rand. I'll buy it for him, and then he'll say, "Right, I've just spent 300 rand. This is how much you got of mine." So it's not written
mm,
down; it's in his head.
yeah.
Whereas Issa's the opposite. Issa will spend everything, and he'll go into minus. He goes, "Dad, can I borrow a bit of money off you this month because I want to buy this toy?" But
Yeah.
but the difference is what I'm teaching them is stuff they don't learn at school. So I'm teaching them to be responsible. I'm teaching them they
Mm,
have to work for their money. I'm then saying
yeah.
when you work for your money, you need to pay X, Y, and Z. And if you don't keep spending your money and you invest it, there's a return on that investment.
Okay.
So there's a few skills they're learning there. So I'm treating them like adults. And I'm talking to we started this when I think Hamza was about 5.5 and Issa
Yeah.
was 4. So now if you look at their ages, Hamza's gonna be 8 next month and Issa's 7, but they know the
Mm,
concept of the pay slips. So
yeah.
Hamza going to be 9 next month. He's currently 8. So,
Okay.
but it's all part of that education. It's all part of development. It's all part of getting them to be self-aware.
Mm,
When they come up to me and they say they want to buy a toy, I'll say to them, is it something you want or something you need? And
yeah,
how
yeah.
quickly are you going to fall out of love from it? So those are the types of conversations I'm having with my two sons that are able to have these
Mm,
conversations. And then Zayn is watching. Zayn's the youngest, and he's watching. So he's trying to run as fast as the other two. and he's
Yeah.
pretty observant at the moment.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Bro, okay, so I'm gonna sort of go off onto another subject now. It's what I want to ask you is something a bit more personal. So I'm gonna go into a layer deep into your life. So there looks something like this. And also, if you feel uncomfortable not answering this one question, just tell me, Matt, I don't feel comfortable answering
Yeah.
this question. No problem. We'll just move on to the next one. Anytime during this podcast, bro, if you feel like that you're uncomfortable, just tell me, bro. Just let's move on to the next question. This one here, bro, it's what's the struggle you went through as a man that you never fully spoken about, and how do you think it's shaped you as a father today? So, what struggle did you go through as a man that you've never told or spoken about, but it shaped you the way you father today, bro?
Damn, that's kind of deep.
Yeah,
It's kind of deep. Um, so, so I think bullying, definitely bullying,
yeah,
and you know, plenty of occasions. So I was
yeah,
in boarding school,
yeah,
and in boarding school you've got students from the age of, I think we were like 10 up until the older generation that were like 19, 20, that were about to um what's the word, graduate and leave, so it's the last year.
yeah,
And when I was in boarding school at the age of 11,
yeah,
you know, you get bullied by these kids. And these kids, these older kids, some of them were good, but the
yeah,
majority of them would bully you, and they'll bully you because they were bigger, they were older, and there was a sense of entitlement.
mm,
And everyone thinks if you go to a boarding school, you know, it's a good environment. But what people miss is there's two types of kids at boarding school. There's the bullies that couldn't be handled, so
yep,
parents, easy option, ship them away and let them deal with. And
yeah,
then you've got the actual kids that were sent there because their parents had intentions that they want them to be educated, etc. So and you're dealing with those type of dynamics. And I
yeah.
always say it's like prison, because in boarding school I think I learned more about crime than I did outside of boarding school, because of the
Wow.
types of characters you're dealing with.
Ah,
Yeah, I won't
okay.
tell you about the crime that I learned, but as an
Yeah, you did.
11-year-old, I matured. I matured very quickly in boarding school.
Yeah,
If because you're dealing with different age groups,
yeah,
and would if you were living at home and you started hanging around with an 18-year-old, your parents will think something's quite not right.
yeah,
But you go to boarding school and you freely mix in amongst all these age groups. So
yeah,
so then you get into fights, and you get into situations where they want to bully you, and they want to make you their, I won't say the word, but
target.
you know yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
they make you
yeah, yeah,
do their doggy work, carry their bags and all that
yeah,
kind of stuff. And
yeah,
I was quite ruthless. I was always fought back. Um, and that has shaped the way I run my kids nowadays, or the way I parent my children. And what I mean by that is,
yeah.
if Hamza needs to want to go on a play date with their
Yeah.
friends, I make it a conscious effort to find out whose house they're going to and
Okay.
the ages of the children in that house. And I'll give you a real life example. Now,
Yeah, bro.
if you're sending your 7-year-old kid to a house and he's playing with a 7-year-old kid, and
Hmm.
that 7-year-old kid's got older brothers that are in their 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, and they're in
Yeah.
the same house, their life experiences are going to be a lot more different than your 7-year-old kid's life experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
And
bro.
there was a story about a kid who was around his friend's house, and
Yeah.
he had beef with someone else, and one of the friends left the door open for the kid that had beef with him to come in and then shoot him inside the house. Now,
Oh.
that's the type
That's
of
deep.
environment that you can expose your kids to if you're not careful, because
Mm,
what turns out to be an innocent play date could turn out to be deadly because you haven't done
mm.
your due diligence or you haven't been thorough in terms of where you're sending your children. And it could be innocent, but then you know, do you want to take that risk? You know, if it's a statistic, do you want to take that risk with your young children? So I think that's one of the biggest learns for me that I'm willing to share. Yeah,
So it's like it sounds like that experience has made you more aware of your surroundings, and you pass those awarenesses to your sons, like more cautious. Sorry, cautious is the word. Yeah, so it's
yeah,
making more
yeah.
cautious due to your upbringing, that experience that you've had. So it's just a bit being a bit more alert. But do you think that's also filtered out into more areas of your life? So you're more analytical now, bro. You're more aware of people. You're more aware of your environment. You're more and that could be played out in your work life, your business life, your children. Um, like because it it don't just affect the one particular area, isn't it, bro? It just filters out into
Mm.
so
Yeah,
many
everything. No, everything.
areas.
So yeah. I mean, upbringing has a lot to do with the way you parent. You know,
Yeah,
my life experiences has a lot to do with the way I parent today,
yeah,
and it starts from you know, I mean, look, we grew up in Fulham. We
yeah.
were exposed to violence from a very young age in primary school.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're
Mm.
talking about 7, 8 year old kids exposed to violence,
Yeah.
and then growing up in an area where we were constantly targeted for the you know for the color of our
Mm.
skin. So that shapes you initially in terms of being cautious and being aware of your surroundings. And then you get
Mm.
older, and then you realize actually life isn't rosy, and this type of thing happens at every stage of your life, whether it's
Mm.
in school, whether it's in college, whether it's in university. You then go into work, and you get bullied at work. You know, I worked in Barclays Bank 15 years. I got bullied.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had some great line managers, not going to lie, some really
Yeah.
good line managers, and I had some real arseholes.
Yeah.
And then the arseholes would bully you. And again, being a guy of color, are you going
Yeah.
to go up against that middle-aged white man
Mm.
that's got influence and that's got, you know, the leaders around him in his pocket? So as a brown man, am I going to go up against that hierarchy? The answer is no. So what do? You
Mm.
stay shut, and you make a choice. You make a choice to either stay shut and get bullied, or go find
Yeah.
something else to do. So no, so it's all these life experiences that have helped me
Mm.
shape the person I am today, but also help prepare my kids to navigate the world that they're growing up in, because it hasn't gone away and it's not going to go away. It's how we make um, use of a situation that we're in, and it's being able to adapt consistently.
Bro, there was quite a few things that you said there that got brought to my attention because through those experiences, it depends. So if how do you not become resentful and spiteful and bitter? Because look, there's two approaches, outcomes that can happen. Either that you take what you've learned and you just develop yourself and you use it, or you just become like the type of people who have this victim mentality, blame and shame kind of person. But you chose a positive path. How how do you get
Yeah,
someone
I
who?
mean, look, I'm not gonna. You can't blame the whole nation or a whole group of people for the actions of one individual,
Yeah, yeah,
because just because one individual's been a right, you know, won't use the word, it doesn't
yeah,
mean
yeah,
everyone else is. Because me, I've got friends from all different nationalities, all different backgrounds, and really good ones.
yeah,
And if someone from a certain ethnic group treats me in a way that isn't nice, doesn't mean it's the whole ethnic group's you know fault. It's because of that one individual who had a weak upbringing.
mm,
Um, doesn't mean everyone else is the same as them. So
Mm.
it's being mature enough to understand. Look, when you're not coming up against a class or a group of people in the
Yeah.
same category of their background. You're coming up against one individual that's a bad apple amongst that group of people.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Got you.
it's being
That,
mature enough to understand that you know,
yeah.
unless you've been attacked by the same group of people consistently and you've never had any positive experiences, then yeah,
Mm.
that's for you personally to deal with. But you know, I've had a very mixed upbringing in terms of the people that I've come across in my life. Some really great people across all nationalities, and I have no, you know, I have a lot of love for everyone that I've come across, and I've come across some really nasty people, including my own ethnicity group.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
bad people in every ethnicity
Yeah.
group. It's not just one in particular. There's bad apples across everywhere, and you have to understand this as an individual. You have to understand people are generally nice, and you will come across, you know, someone that isn't nice. But you have to understand it's that individual. It's not the group of people.
Do you think all right? So in reference to what you're saying, do you think it could be a case of this, bro? Look. So say for example, you've talked about experiences that you've had good examples, you've had bad examples, and that. Do you think how I'm going to see my worldview will be based on how much references I've had? So if the good outweigh the bad, then I'm more likely to have a positive outlook. But if my references are so much negative, I'm only going to see it that way, innit?
Yeah, correct.
And that's
Exactly. And that's
yeah,
that's the point I'm trying to make. So
yeah,
if you are constantly targeted by one group of people constantly, and you've had no positive experiences, then your mindset will be these people don't like you. Okay, let's look at something realistically. And this is
mm,
close to home. So Israel and Palestine. Okay,
yeah,
so the Palestinian people have been persecuted by the Zionist regime for years,
yeah,
years and years and years. So their perception of that class of people is these people are evil.
mm,
Now, is everyone in Israel evil? No, you know,
no, they're
not
not. Yeah,
everyone is
yeah,
evil. There are some
yeah,
good people in Israel,
yeah,
but the perception is that every single Zionist living in Israel is hated by every Palestinian, and vice versa.
mm,
The Zionists in Israel think every single Palestinian person is a terrorist,
yeah. Agree.
and that is such a dangerous mindset. It's a man. It's the mindset of a weak man, um,
Mm,
a weak man that has never had a proper fist fight with another man, who's probably always been protected in their life. Um,
mm,
you know, and that's the difference between a strong man and that is the classic example of a weak man and a strong man.
mm,
That type of mindset. You know, they will play the victim constantly,
mm.
and they will say everyone in Palestine is a bad person, regardless.
It's
So
like trying
yeah,
to
so
not
that's the classic example. Yeah,
yeah, it's like trying to not take accountability, isn't it? It's easy
correct.
to play victim and it's easy to just blame like, oh yeah, it's them over there, it was that person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct,
yeah.
correct. Yeah,
I get
absolutely.
it, I get that, bro. I get that.
Mm.
Okay, bro. I'm gonna move on to the next question. Okay. Do you think many fathers today are silently carrying pressure that they don't know how to express? What's your thoughts on that, bro?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So financial is a massive one for
Yep,
for a lot of fathers.
yep,
Fathers have got to balance, balance the books, go
yep,
out, earn a living. Kids nowadays aren't cheap. You know, they want all the
yep,
latest gear, all the latest tech.
yep.
You know, if your wife's working, there's pressures at home because
Mm,
you're trying to work, your wife's trying to work, who's looking after the kids. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure for fathers,
mm,
and I think a lot of fathers feel they haven't got enough hours in the day. So
mm.
you know, they have to work extended hours to make money.
Yeah.
When they come home, they then got to spend time with the family. and try and give them some attention. But for
Yeah.
many men, that is the time that they can unwind. So
Yes. Yeah.
do they
Got
choose
you.
to unwind? Do they choose to give
Yeah.
time back to the family? And then when it comes to the weekend, especially in the UK, and this is one of the reasons why I left the UK, weekends aren't fun in the UK.
Mm.
You work the whole week to get to the weekend, and the weekend you're cleaning, you're going shopping, you're trying to keep
Mm.
the kids, entertained. You're trying to do all your admin, and then by the time you've finished everything, and you've got to visit family members, it's now Sunday evening, and you go to bed shattered, only just to get up again back onto that hamster wheel.
Mm.
So these pressures are massive, massive pressures in the UK. And one of the things one of the main reasons we moved to South Africa was there was two.
Yeah.
Number one was our kids. We
Yep.
didn't want our kids growing up with a mindset of some of the stuff that the schools are drumming into kids nowadays,
Mm.
which go against our Islamic beliefs and principles. So that was
Yeah.
one of the key reasons, and the other one was to regain a better quality of life, of being able to
Mm.
have time with the family, being able to enjoy our weekends. So in South Africa, me, Naz, and the boys, we have a great weekend. So we enjoy our weekends because here you can afford to hire help. It's not you try to hire someone to clean your home in the UK, you need a second income.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
in South Africa, it doesn't cost as much,
Mm.
and so whereas in the UK we'll be cleaning and doing all the weekly chores, we don't have to do that in South Africa. We get that luxury where we can spend time with family. So yeah, so the pressures for a man are huge. Personally, we've been able to balance it, so we're thankful. Alhamdulillah, we made the right choice when we made it, and we're a lot happier here. The kids enjoy it. The weather's great, alhamdulillah. So so you have to decide what you want out of life, and as a father especially, um, do you want to continue on that hamster wheel where you're only living and
Mm.
working to pay the bills at the end of the month, or is work-life balance better, a bit of sunshine, and a bit more
Yeah.
time back with the family? Those are the. I mean, you've lived in Egypt, so you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about versus the
Absolutely.
UK.
Mm. All right, bro. My final question to you, bro. Something for the fathers out there, as well. If if a father's watching and they feel lost, they feel disconnected, or they feel like as if they're failing, what would you say to them right now, bro? What is that one piece of
No,
nugget that you can give them?
look, it's not about failure. If
Yeah.
you're living and you're breathing, you're still winning. That's my motto. So
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
so
Golden, golden advice. Yeah.
you know so when I was in Hajj, I think it was in 2015. I like to walk, so I'm an active walker,
Mm.
and a lot of people that I used to go Hajj with, they'll complain, oh, it's too hard to walk, and it's too it's too hot, and I'll see men that are walking with their feet not straight, their feet sideways, so they've got some issues with their
Mm.
feet, and I'll see old people walking, and I'll see old women walking, and I'll see
Mm.
parents carrying a 3-month-old baby doing Hajj in the heat.
Oh my gosh,
And
yeah.
you look at those scenarios and you look around you and you say, I have got no reason in the world to complain. Alhamdulillah, if I'm still living, if I'm still breathing and I'm still walking, I've got no reason to complain. So
Mm.
fathers, it gets tough. It's one of those things that we have to learn to deal with it. But mentally, our role is to be strong. Our role is to keep fighting.
Mm.
If you're on the battlefield, you will fight till the end.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Again, you have to look at life as if you are on a battlefield with your family, and your role as a father is they look up to you. So you can have your bad days, and when you're having your bad days, that's when you call on your friends, your support network, the guys you've grown up with. Go to the gym, um, go hiking, go take a swim, sauna. These kind of things, they change your perspective. Just changing the scenery or changing the view changes their perspective. But if you sit there and you're having a burnout and you're looking at the same wall and you're sitting in the same environment, you're not going to win. You have to take yourself out of the environment, go do something, call on someone. You will have someone you can call on, and then
Yeah.
have that belief in yourself. And the belief is, you've got this far in your life. This is just another hurdle. And then once you get past that hurdle, you'll look back and you'll think, damn, 3-4 years ago, I was really struggling and this is what was going through my mind. And alhamdulillah, you know what? I looked at it. If I'm in this position 4 years from now, then yeah, I've
Yeah.
got a reason to be upset. But if I know mentally the position I'm in today will get better as the days gradually go forward, then you've got to be positive and you've got to fight for it.
Amazing. Amazing. No, Jazakallah khair for that. So the message, I guess, is to just keep persevering. And as long as, like what you said, that you're breathing, you got your hands, your eyes, your feet, just look for a way, but you have to fight. And I guess every responsibility falls back on us. We've only got ourselves to blame, I guess. We are the
Yeah,
ones
it's
that
not
can
about
make the
blame.
change.
It's not about blame. It's about, I always say it's about raising
Yeah.
the next generation. So on a
Mm.
final thought. So the job
Yeah.
I'm doing
Go
at the
on.
moment. Okay, so I spent
Yeah.
27 years in retail, in corporate,
Yeah.
and I learned a lot. The two companies I worked for gave me a lot, and some of the
Mm.
skills I learned was because of those two companies.
Okay.
I now work in an NGO, and what I can
Mm.
do is I can consume all the information I have, and it can die with me, or I can share my knowledge. I can literally download everything I've got in my brain to
Yeah.
all the people I'm working with in this NGO, and then they can continue that. They can then share that knowledge down. And for me, that's rewarding for me, because then I know if once I've left this world, once I've gone, for me, it's
Mm.
Sadqa Jariyah. So if someone is continuing that skill set or continuing the knowledge that I've left behind, as long as that knowledge continues, that's Sadqa Jariyah for me. The same
Yeah.
goes for children. So
Yeah.
my role is to make sure when I'm 6 foot under, my sons are
Mm.
praying Quran, my sons are doing zikr, my sons are doing, good acts. They're giving charity. They're doing things that will benefit humanity. I'm
Yes.
only
Yeah.
doing the stuff I'm doing today because my
Yeah.
parents installed it in me. My parents said, don't lie, pray 5 times a day, keep,
Mm.
fast, be a good person, don't cheat, don't do this, don't do that. Um, both my parents, man, look like them Jannah, have both passed away. Now, I can be Sadqa Jariyah for them. So all my good acts, all the good deeds that I'm doing can benefit them.
Yeah. Mm.
Or I can just be a weak man, blame the whole world for all the problems,
Mm.
and give up in life. So, I say you have a choice and you have a chance. And
Choice and
until those two options, have disappeared, don't stop. Keep going.
Mm.
Keep going. Don't ever stop.